Ambassador Krell Voss adjusted his ceremonial collar for the 14th time in as many minutes, silently cursing as his three-fingered hands fumbled with the intricate clasps. The council chambers loomed before him, an immense rotunda of polished metals and vibrant bioluminescent accents that was meant to inspire awe but mostly made him nauseous. For the sake of the 7 moons, Krell, stop fidgeting. Talia Bren, his executive assistant, hissed, swatting his hand away from his collar. You resemble a jittery cadet on their maiden spacewalk. Krell emitted a laugh that sounded more like a person choking on a particularly stubborn morsel of food. Oh, just a tad anxious, me? Why would I be nervous? I'm merely about to inform a species of belligerent primates that we're severing their galactic trade ties. What could possibly go awry? Talia rolled all 4 of her eyes, each a distinct shade of disdain. The council reached its verdict: you're simply the bearer of the news. Precisely, and there's a charming Earth proverb about the fate of messengers, something about executing them. Their idioms are as violent as their pastimes. The grand doors to the council chamber swung open with a dramatic whoosh that Krell was certain had been specifically engineered to intimidate visiting dignitaries. Inside, the 217 representatives of the Galactic Confederation sat in ascending rings of authority, their various appendages, tendrils, and sensory organs all focused on the central speaking platform. Supreme Counselor Drab Mortek, a massive gelatinous entity who had somehow evolved both pomposity and intelligence despite lacking a spine, quivered authoritatively at the chamber's apex. Ambassador Voss, Mortek's voice resonated through the translator field. The council has reached its decision concerning Earth. The vote was. The Supreme Counselor paused for dramatic effect, extending several of his sensing nodules, 198 in favor, 11 against, with 8 abstentions. Krell suppressed a groan. Nearly unanimous. This was destined to be a calamity. As the diplomatic liaison to the Sol system, Mortek continued, his translucent body pulsing with self-importance, you will deliver the Council's decision. Earth has violated Galactic Environmental Protection Treaty 459b by persisting in the utilization of non-renewable energy sources and decelerating their weapons advancement beyond acceptable levels for a Class 4 civilization. They will face comprehensive trade embargoes until compliance is achieved. Supreme Counselor, Krell found his voice, struggling to maintain composure. With all due respect, I must reiterate my concerns regarding humanity's potential response to such measures. They don't react favorably to being dictated to. Counselor Jet, a razor-thin Aven whose species was renowned for their military prowess or had been before they'd embraced religion and renounced conquest, leaned forward. Ambassador, your warnings have been noted repeatedly, but humans are barely a century into faster-than-light travel. They possess a mere 17 colony worlds. The Confederation encompasses 40,000 systems. What, precisely, do you imagine they could do? Laughter rippled through the chamber, a discordant symphony of clicks, whistles, rumbles, and whatever passed for amusement among the methane breathers in Section 6. They're unpredictable, Krell insisted, feeling sweat beating along his cranial ridge. Their entire history is a sequence of lesser powers overcoming greater ones through unforeseen means. Enough. Mortek's body flushed a deep crimson. The decision is made. Deliver the sanctions. Remind them of our overwhelming technological superiority if necessary. What could these humans possibly do besides accept our generous terms? Krell Voss surveyed the chamber, taking in the smug visages of 217 species who had never actually encountered a human in person, and felt the distinct sensation of someone walking over his future grave. As you command, Supreme Counselor. I'll depart for Earth immediately. As he turned to leave, Krell couldn't shake the feeling that he might be the first casualty in a very, very foolish war. Earth's surprising and defiant response to sanctions, the Earth Diplomatic Center in New Geneva was, as always, a maelstrom of activity that made Krell's sensory ridges throb with discomfort. Humans never seem to do anything quietly, not their politics, not their commerce, and certainly not their diplomacy. They've kept you waiting for 3 hours, Talia fumed, pacing the antechamber with such intensity that her footfalls were leaving minute scorch marks on the polished floor. This is a deliberate affront. Krell shrugged his shoulder membranes, which fluttered with the motion. Perhaps. Or perhaps their chronological perception differs from the galactic standard. Or, perhaps, and I find this most likely, they're in there devising how to tell me to procreate with myself in the most imaginative way possible. A soft chime announced someone's arrival, and the doors to the main chamber finally slid open. Instead of the full diplomatic contingent Krell had anticipated, a single human female entered. "Ambassador Voss," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I'm Director Morgan Reeves, Earth Defense Force." "Thank you for your patience." Krell rose, towering a full meter above the human director. "Not Ambassador Chang? This is a diplomatic matter." The woman's smile sharpened into something predatory. "Not anymore, it isn't." She gestured for him to follow her into the chamber. Inside, instead of the usual long negotiation table, there was only a small display platform and 2 chairs. "Please, have a seat," Reeves said, her tone making it clear this wasn't a request. As Krell sat, uncomfortably aware that the chair seemed designed for someone with fewer vertebrae, Reeves activated the display. A holographic representation of Earth's solar system materialized between them. "I'll be brief, Ambassador. The United Earth government has received and reviewed the Galactic Council's sanctions. Our response is as follows." She tapped at control, and the hologram shifted to show what appeared to be hundreds of small craft emerging from Earth and its colonies. "What am I looking at?" Krell asked, though he was beginning to suspect the horrifying answer. "Our newly commissioned privateer fleet," Reeves replied with casual brutality. "As of 06000 Universal Time today, Earth has authorized letters of marque and reprisal against all Confederation shipping." Krell felt his primary heart stutter. You've legalized piracy against the entire Confederation?" His voice rose to a pitch that made Talia wince. "Director Reeves, the combined might of the Confederation fleet is thousands of times larger than your entire military." Reeves laughed, a sound like gravel in a disposal unit. "Oh, we're not using our military, Ambassador. These are private vessels, crewed by volunteers, very enthusiastic volunteers. Did you know that humans have a long, romantic history with privateering?" "This is madness," Krell whispered. "The Council will view this as an act of war." "Funny thing about that," Reeves replied, leaning forward. "You can't declare war against pirates, seeing as they're not a government entity. They're just independent entrepreneurs with questionable business models." She winked, an unsettling gesture that involved partially closing one eye, which Krell had always found disturbing. Krell's third heart began palpitating. "Your species is insane. You realize that, don't you? Completely, utterly insane." "Perhaps. But we're also very, very good at asymmetric warfare." "While you're processing that thought, I should mention that you have approximately 18 hours to leave our solar system before your diplomatic status becomes, let's say, questionable." As if on cue, Krell's personal communicator chirped with an emergency alert. He glanced down to see reports already coming in of Confederation vessels being seized in human-controlled space. "You've made a terrible mistake," Krell said, rising on unsteady legs. Director Reeves stood as well, her posture relaxed despite having just initiated hostilities against the most powerful political entity in the known galaxy. "No, Ambassador," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "you did, when you thought you could push us around. First military engagement, humans shocking the aliens." Commander Pellic Drez of the Confederation security vessel Righteous Intervention considered himself a practical being. 27 stellar cycles in Confederation service had taught him that most problems could be solved with the right combination of firepower and bureaucracy. These human privateers would be no different. "Status report," he barked, his gill slits flaring with anticipation as his bridge crew scrambled to look important. 8 human vessels detected, Commander, reported his sensor officer, a nervous Trilaxian whose eye stalks were vibrating so rapidly they appeared blurry. "Small craft, minimal shielding. They appear to be modified mining ships, cargo haulers. Their configuration doesn't match any known military design." Drez snorted, expelling a small cloud of his species' equivalent of amused contempt. "So, they've slapped weapons onto civilian ships. How quaint." He stretched his command tentacles toward the tactical display. "Deploy in standard interdiction formation. Let's show these primates what happens when you challenge the Confederation." The righteous intervention was a dreadnought-class vessel with enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. Accompanying it were 3 pursuit-class cruisers, each capable of handling a modest planetary rebellion. Against 8 retrofitted civilian ships, it wasn't even sporting. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted, "the humans are sending us a message." "Put it through," Dres ordered, settling his bulk more comfortably into his command pool. "This should be entertaining." A human face appeared on the main screen, dark-skinned with facial hair arranged in an elaborate pattern around its mouth. It was smiling, which Dres knew was either a sign of aggression or friendliness, depending on context. Given the circumstances, he assumed the former. "Confederation vessel, this is Captain Leo Jackson of the Free Merchant vessel. Sorry about your luck. You are carrying goods sanctioned by the Earth government. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." A moment of stunned silence fell over the bridge before Dres erupted into a gurgling laugh that sent droplets of his natural lubricating fluid spattering across the nearest console. "Is this some kind of joke? You intend to board us with your toys?" Dres could barely contain himself. "Your vessels couldn't penetrate our shields if we gave you a weakened, detailed instructions." The human smile widened. "That's fair. But here's the thing, we don't need to penetrate your shields." Something about the human's confidence made Dres' amusement curdle into unease. "Tactical, full scan of all approaching vessels." "Sir, they're deploying objects, not weapons." "They read as." The tactical officer paused, confusion evident in the rapid color changes rippling across her skin. "Sir, they appear to be dropping mining drones." "Thousands of them." "Mining drones?" Dres repeated, his voice rising in pitch. "What threat could mining drones pose?" "Sir." The sensor officer's panic cut through the bridge chatter. "The drones are altering the local spacetime metric. They're creating microgravitational lenses around our shield perimeter." Dres felt his primary heart sink. "They're destabilizing our warp field, correct?" "Correct, sir. We can't enter FTL while they're there." A violent shudder ran through the ship, accompanied by the distinctive screech of metal being stressed beyond tolerance. "What now?" Dres demanded, his tentacles gripping his command chair with white-knuckled intensity. Sir, the humans they've somehow matched the resonant frequency of our shield generators and are bombarding us with targeted electromagnetic pulses. Our shields are fluctuating, 60%. 45% efficiency and dropping." On the view screen, Captain Jackson's smile hadn't faltered. "Commander, in about 30 seconds, your shields will fail completely. When they do, my boarding teams will teleport directly onto your bridge. This can go 2 ways. You can surrender your vessel and cargo now, or we can have a messy conversation about it after my people arrive. Your choice." "Impossible." Dres sputtered. "Our quantum entanglement scramblers prevent unauthorized matter transmission. You can't teleport through them." The human raised an eyebrow. "Quantum entanglement? That's your protection?" "Oh, buddy, that's not how we do it." "Then how?" "Trade secret." "Tick-tock, Commander." Dres looked around his bridge at his terrified crew, then back at the implacable human face on the screen. His military training screamed at him to fight to the last, but his practical nature, the one that had kept him alive for 27 cycles, was quietly suggesting that perhaps today was not a good day to die. "Stand down," he ordered, deflating visibly. "Power down weapons systems. Prepare to be boarded." As his crew scrambled to comply, Dres couldn't help but wonder how exactly he was going to explain in his report that his dreadnought-class warship had been defeated by mining equipment and a human with an irritating smile. Captain Jackson's grin grew even wider. "Wise choice, Commander. Don't worry, we'll leave you with enough fuel to limp home. The Confederation should know what happened here today." "And what exactly did happen here today?" Dres asked, his voice hollow with defeat. "Simple, my gelatinous friend, you just became a cautionary tale." Council's emergency meeting and underestimation of humans. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been convened faster than any in living memory, which didn't prevent it from being a complete disaster. 217 representatives, each convinced they had the solution to the human problem, created a cacophony that made Krell wish evolution had never gifted his species with hearing. Order! I will have order! Supreme Counselor Mortek's amplified voice boomed through the chamber, his gelatinous form pulsing in angry crimson. The room gradually quieted, though several representatives continued muttering among themselves. In the 14 standard days since sanctions were implemented, Mortek began, his tone dripping with barely contained fury. Human privateers have seized 78 Confederation vessels, disabled another 123, and compromised 6 trade outposts. The economic impact is significant. Counselor Jet screeched, her Avon features contorted with rage. My people's primary shipping conglomerate has declared bankruptcy. These humans aren't just pirates, they're economic terrorists. Krell watched from his position at the diplomatic station, feeling a mix of vindication and terror. He'd warned them, hadn't he? Nobody listens to the diplomat until everything's on fire. Ambassador Voss, Mortek swiveled several sensing nodules toward him. You were our primary liaison with Earth. Explain how a species with 17 colony worlds has managed to wreak such havoc. All eyes, stalks, and sensory appendages turned toward Krell. He cleared his throat nervously. As I attempted to explain before sanctions were imposed, humans have a unique psychological profile. Their history is filled with examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through asymmetric strategies. They are, to put it bluntly, very good at being very bad. That doesn't explain how they're bypassing our most sophisticated defense systems, a mechanoid representative buzzed from the technology sector. Their teleportation technology shouldn't exist. It violates every quantum principle we understand. A gruff laugh erupted from Counselor Vorak, one of the few military representatives who hadn't spoken until now. The massive ursine creature leaned forward, his ceremonial armor clanking. Because it isn't teleportation, he growled. Our intelligence suggests they're using some primitive version of dimension slipping. It's a technology so fundamentally flawed and dangerous that we abandoned research centuries ago because the failure rate was over 80%. And humans are using this willingly, gasped a representative from the methane-breathing quadrant, enthusiastically. Vorak confirmed, from what we can gather, they're fully aware of the risks. They simply don't care. Their boarding teams call themselves slip jumpers and consider a 70% survival rate pretty good odds. A horrified murmur swept through the chamber. So what do we do? Demanded Zet. Capitulate to their demands? Remove the sanctions? Show the galaxy that any minor species with suicidal tendencies can blackmail the Confederation? Mortek's form rippled thoughtfully. No. We will deploy the 14th Fleet. A show of overwhelming force will remind these humans of their place. Krell couldn't contain himself any longer. Supreme Counselor, with all due respect, escalation will only. You've done quite enough, Ambassador Voss, Mortek interrupted. Your cautious approach clearly failed. We will now try Counselor Zet's more direct methods. Vorak rumbled ominously from his seat. The humans have a saying that seems relevant, bringing a knife to a gunfight. I fear we're about to learn what it means. As the council erupted into arguments once more, Krell slumped in his station. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. Humans didn't think like other species. They didn't calculate odds the same way. And, most dangerously of all, they viewed the impossible as simply a challenge not yet overcome. The 14th Fleet was about to discover this the hard way. Major battle with unexpected human tactics and technology. Admiral Vane of the 14th Confederation Fleet considered herself a master strategist. With 6 tentacles manipulating the three-dimensional battle display before her, she orchestrated the movements of 200 warships with the precision of a concert conductor. The humans had been clever with their privateering tactics, she would grant them that. But against a proper military formation, their little rebellion would be crushed within hours. All vessels in position, Admiral, her first officer reported, mandibles clicking with anticipation. The humans have gathered their forces at the edge of the Tau Ceti system, approximately 300 ships, mostly converted civilian vessels with minimal military capabilities. Vane's eye stalk swiveled to examine the tactical display. 300? That's more than expected. No matter. Begin the approach. Standard overwhelming force protocol. The massive Confederation armada moved forward in perfect formation, weapon systems humming to life, shields at maximum. This would be less a battle and more an execution. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted, the humans are broadcasting on all frequencies. It appears to be music. Vane's skin flushed with irritation. Put it through. Let's hear what passes for psychological warfare among primates. The bridge speakers crackled to life, filling the command deck with a thundering bass line and screeching instruments, accompanied by a human voice howling about a highway to hell, whatever that meant. Bent, primitive intimidation tactics, Vane scoffed. Maintain course. Energy spike, the sensor officer shrieked, all professional decorum forgotten. Multiple sources. The readings are off the charts. Before Vane could respond, the space between the fleets lit up with a dazzling display of light. Where empty void had been moments before, dozens of massive ring-shaped structures winked into existence, crackling with energy that distorted the very fabric of spacetime around them. What in the seven hells are those? Vane demanded, rising from her command chair. Her science officer was frantically checking readings, his exoskeleton pale with shock. They appear to be artificial wormhole generators, but the energy requirements would be. Incoming, the tactical officer screamed. Through the newly formed spatial rings came a barrage like nothing Vane had ever witnessed. It wasn't energy weapons or conventional projectiles, but what appeared to be small asteroids, accelerated to relativistic speeds. The first wave struck the forward elements of the Confederation fleet before they could even adjust their shields. 8 cruisers vanished instantly, transformed into expanding clouds of superheated plasma and debris. Impossible. Vane gasped. They're using microsingularity accelerators. That technology was banned by the Confederation millennia ago. The destabilization risks alone. Admiral, the human fleet is moving, her first officer interrupted, pointing a trembling appendage at the tactical display. The human vessels were breaking formation, but not in any recognizable military pattern. They were spreading out in what appeared to be complete chaos, each ship moving independently without coordination. What are they doing? Vane muttered. That's no battle formation I've ever seen. That's because it's not a formation, her tactical officer responded, his voice hollow with realization. They're executing randomized flight paths. They're using chaos theory as a defense strategy. Vane felt her primary heart skip a beat. That's insane. No targeting computer can function without being able to predict. They don't need targeting computers, the science officer cut in, his voice rising in pitch. Those wormhole generators give them point-to-point weapons delivery. They don't have to aim. They just create a spatial distortion that connects their weapons directly to our ships. On the tactical display, Vane watched in horror as her perfect formation disintegrated into panic. Confederation ships were firing wildly, their precision weapons useless against vessels following no discernible pattern. Meanwhile, more relativistic projectiles continued to pour through the spatial rings, each one finding its mark with terrifying accuracy. Order a retreat. Vane commanded, her voice barely audible above the chaos of the bridge. Admiral, her first officer questioned, clearly shocked. I said retreat. Vane roared, slamming her tentacles against the command console. Full emergency withdrawal now, before we lose the entire fleet. As the remnants of the 14th Fleet scrambled to escape, leaving behind the burning wreckage of nearly 60 vessels, Admiral Vane received one final communication from the human forces. A human female appeared on screen, her expression calm despite the battle raging around her. Admiral, this is Fleet Commander Elena Diaz of the Earth Defense Force. We'll allow your withdrawal without pursuit. Take a message back to your council, the sanctions end, or next time we don't stop. The transmission cut off, leaving Vane staring at static. In the background, that infernal human music continued to play, the lyrics now sounding less like primitive intimidation and more like a prophecy, highway to hell, indeed. final confrontation and humanity's ultimate victory, the Galactic Council chamber had never been so silent. Where once voices had argued, now only hushed whispers broke the tense quiet. As Supreme Counselor Mortek's massive display screen showed the approach of the human diplomatic vessel, if one could call a heavily armed dreadnought bristling with weapons a diplomatic vessel. They named it the Aggressive Negotiations. Krell Voss observed, unable to keep a hint of admiration from his voice, "You have to appreciate their sense of humor, at least." "Silence, Ambassador." Mortek snapped, his gelatinous form quivering with barely contained rage. "Your fascination with human culture is partly what led us to this disaster." Krell might have responded, but the chamber doors hissed open to reveal a delegation of 5 humans, entering with a confidence that bordered on swagger. At their head walked Director Morgan Reeves, now wearing what appeared to be a formal military uniform decorated with symbols of rank and achievement. "Director Reeves," Mortek began, clearly struggling to maintain a diplomatic tone, "the Council has agreed to hear Earth's terms for ending this conflict." Reeves smiled that same predatory smile that had haunted Krell's nightmares for weeks. "Excellent. Though it's Admiral Reeves now, recent promotion. War creates opportunities for advancement, as I'm sure you understand." She gestured to her companions. "May I present General Ako Tanaka, Admiral Leo Jackson, Dr. Richard Okonko, and Professor Mila Rodriguez, our negotiating team." Krell recognized Jackson as the privateer captain who had captured the Righteous Intervention. The human caught his eye and had the audacity to wink. "We will hear your terms," Mortek continued stiffly, "though I must remind you that the Confederation still possesses overwhelming military superiority. The recent setbacks do not change the fundamental balance of power." Dr. Okonko, a dark-skinned human with elegant silver hair, stepped forward with a data tablet. "About that fundamental balance of power, perhaps you'd like to see our latest intelligence report?" He tapped the device, and holographic projections appeared throughout the chamber, showing detailed schematics of what appeared to be every major Confederation military installation, defense grid, and command center. "How did you?" Counselor Jet began, her feathers bristling with alarm. "Your encryption was impressive," Professor Rodriguez cut in, her tone conversational as if